Welcome. I'm Kevin Miller. This is a podcast for your personal evolution. In this episode, the intelligence of your heart, how it can be blocked and how to free your heart's capabilities. Have you ever had an emotion from a past trouble or trauma or an event, and it just resurfaces out of nowhere? I feel we talk about it often in our culture that you encounter something and out of nowhere, it seems you feel overcome with sadness or anger or nostalgia from something you had forgotten about, or maybe you thought you had gotten over. Well, my guest today explains a theory that the unresolved emotions that we have actually exist as kind of wounds and energy balls in our body, and how they can block us, with the worst result being an actual blockage around our heart. And we start off, as you'll hear, discussing research on the literal intelligence contained in the heart that I found really intriguing and enlightening. The references that he hits on over time are just, I find them super compelling. Well, my guest is holistic physician, Dr. Bradley Nelson, who is one of the world's foremost experts on natural methods of achieving wellness. He's the creator of the Emotion Code, the Body Code, which I had him on the show previously for, and the Belief Code. His best-selling books include the Emotion Code and the Body Code. And then this newest book, and my muse for the conversation, is called the Heart Code. It actually comes out, depending on when you listen to this, it comes out December 2nd, 2025. It's available for pre-order now. He's got a whole bunch of gifts that go along with it if you go to drbradleynelson.com. And some of you may feel that some of the concepts shared here are a bit far-reaching, but I think you'll find the discussion very down to earth and will gain insight for yourself and how you can find more capacity in regards to your heart and emotions. So coming up next, my discussion with Dr. Bradley Nelson and this concept of freeing, in essence, the intelligence of our heart. Let's evolve ourselves today. Brad, this focus on emotions and heart and these areas that I feel we seldom give due diligence, of course, which is why you give focus to them as well, I am continuously curious about, and just honored to have you back on the show for a second time. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Kevin, for having me back on the show. It's great to see you again. I'm excited. Looking forward to this. It's gonna be fun.
Me too. I'm here to learn more. I want to start with, it's really my experience and what I experienced with a lot of other people. We look at aches and pains. I'm going to start from a physiological standpoint, that we look at our aches and pains. Again, I'll own it. I'm a lifetime athlete. I saw my first chiropractor when I was probably 15 from a big accident and some back problems. And I continued to think throughout my lifetime of, man, I got a back problem, a neck problem. I got an ache and a pain. And I thought musculoskeletal. So let's go deal with that. Get chiropractic, get popped, get adjusted, physical therapy, whatnot. And it was a long time later, decades later, where I was having a back issue and I was really doing my own homework, Brad. And, and I had a nutritionist that I was talking with too, and a light went on. I thought, wait a minute, I'm eating peppers constantly. I have this super clean diet and I kind of spice it up with peppers, a nightshade. I thought, I wonder if there's any correlation, because it's a really consistent piece. Took that out, took the back pain away. So that's the first thing that took my musculoskeletal focus and took it to diet. Well, then the next level of awareness was it was really intestinal stuff, Brad. IBS and I just felt like my diet's clean. My exercise is clean. I'm inspired. And through, again, more research, whatever, really came to anxiety. That was my first connection to my inner workings, the psychology affecting that. So just traveling that, I feel like we are still in the infancy stages culturally at understanding that neck pain probably has many other opportunities for a problem other than it must have been my pillow. Fair?
Right. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The fascinating thing is, I started out as a computer programmer, many years ago. So I was doing programming for people back in the early 80s. when the IBM PC first came out, way before most people's time now. And when I became a doctor, it slowly began to dawn on me that there was a computer inside of each person, but it wasn't like any computer that I had ever seen before. It was a binary computer, and we could ask questions of that computer, and the body would give answers, and it would give answers in the form of a slight weakness or normal strength in the body. So, for example, if I were there with you, if you were to hold your arm out parallel to the floor, and if you were to say, "My name is Kevin," if you made that statement, that would be true. If I were to press down on your outstretched arm at that point, you'd be able to resist me because that's a true statement and your subconscious mind knows it. But if you were to say something untrue or incongruent, like if you were to say, "My name is Bob," and try to resist my downward pressure, you wouldn't be able to. And so this is the binary nature of this internal computer. And, we all have a conscious mind where we spend all of our waking hours and work our jobs and, have our relationships and so on. But then the subconscious mind is really the smart part of us that's always running. When you go to sleep at night, the conscious mind shuts off. The subconscious mind is still there running everything, creating millions of new cells every minute and keeping your heart beating and air moving in and out of your lungs and creating trillions of chemical reactions every minute. And so it's a level of intelligence that is really, I think, beyond our ability to comprehend, first of all. But what I found when I was in practice, when I began to learn how to ask questions of this internal computer, having been a programmer for many years, the consistent thing that showed up was that no matter what people were suffering from, no matter how old they were, how young they were, no matter if they were having physical symptoms like pain, or if they were dealing with things like infertility or asthma, digestive disorders, anxiety, depression, phobias, panic attacks, PTSD, or if they've been diagnosed with some kind of a disease process, they all had something in common. And that was that their symptoms, whatever they were manifesting either wholly or in part because of emotional baggage. And so that was an amazing thing. And it was a huge, it was a huge advantage in my practice because I was able consistently to get people well who had been told there was really no hope for them in Western medicine at all because what they had couldn't be cured with drugs or surgery. So these were the kind of people that were coming to me. These were most of my patients during the last 10 years I was in practice. And what I found was that by releasing their emotional baggage, oftentimes that was enough to just push them over the line to be able to actually then get well. It was really interesting. And to understand what emotional baggage is, if you think about the physical body feels solid to us. And we're made out of skin and bone and muscle and nerve tissue and, blood vessels and everything else. But really, if you were to look at the body from the point of view of a physicist, you'd understand that the physical body is really just pure energy. Our bodies are pure energy. And in fact, they say that if you could remove all the empty space from between every atom in our bodies, you could fit all 8 billion people in the world into a box the size of a sugar cube, right? And so that seems, that's hard for us to relate to and hard to imagine, but that's the reality really of our existence. And so what happens is when we're feeling an emotion, we're feeling a certain frequency of energy because everything is energy. Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, good thing, right? We all want to do that. He said, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration.
Yeah.
That is it. Everything is made out of those things. And Einstein said the medicine of the future will be the medicine of frequencies. Well, when you're feeling a certain emotion, you're feeling a certain frequency. Anger is a different frequency of emotion, of energy, vibration, than an emotion of grief. And they're all different. But when you're feeling an intense emotion, sometimes that emotion is just too powerful and the energy can become trapped in the body. And we call that a trapped emotion, literally our emotional baggage.
I think of it when you say emotional baggage. One of the things I've helped myself with, at least recently, was go back to my analogy of the back pain that I now attribute, at least to a part, to a great part, to these nightshades that apparently my body doesn't seem to like. And I thought of it as my novice assumption was probably causing some inflammation that's coinciding. For me, it could be with, many different injuries, whatever. And I would literally have kind of that back go out where I can't hardly move, can't hardly breathe or whatnot. So now take it to emotional baggage. And this was as of late. And I thought, gosh, how about emotional inflammation? What am I doing again? Like with my anxieties, that's causing the same thing. It's a physical manifestation of this emotional pain, baggage, junk, inflammation, whatnot. And back to your electrical aspect, I think back in my more religious days, I would have felt that was hoodoo guru stuff. And now I look at it. I think somebody pointed out one time and said, what happens when you have a heart attack, or they depict that, on TV? They take those, what is it, defibrillators out.
Yeah,
And
right.
shock you. How are you not? Yeah. How are you not? And then on those disconnects, I hooked up a new internet at some point, and we were just getting, instead of the rage and speed we should have, we were getting really low speed. My inclination was to go, screw with the computer. What's wrong with the computer? Then go, what about the modem? Must be the router. Only to realize that as I had put the coax cable in, I had a coax cable, a wire in that middle wire that where all the energy's going through. And one of the wires had come out and was touching the external foil kind of thing.
Yeah, I'll do it.
That was it. Fix that little fix, put it back in, and, rage and speed again. But how often do we not go to the energy? We go to the mechanics, the bigger, or what seems like the bigger mechanical issues.
Yeah, it's true. Just as an interesting aside, you're talking about your back pain earlier, and it's interesting because other people have noticed the same kind of thing. In fact, I was reading about Stonewall Jackson from the Civil War, famous Southern general, and people thought he was kind of crazy because he believed if he ate peppers or pepper, period, his left leg would hurt. And people thought, oh, that's nuts. But of course, he was actually right, and it all has to do with interconnections between the organs and the glands and the muscles of the body. If you got low back pain, there's probably a little imbalance going on in one kidney or the other. And a lot of the time that's actually what the imbalance is being caused by. If you have emotional baggage, depending on where that emotional energy lodges, see, a trapped emotion is a ball of energy from about the size of a baseball, about the size of a softball. And wherever those energies lodge in the body, they can cause trouble, depending on where they are. For example, let's say that a trapped emotion lodges in the area of your liver. Well, you might start noticing that you suddenly have allergies, or maybe you didn't have allergies before, right? Now suddenly you have hay fever. You didn't have it last year, but this year you have it, that kind of thing. Or you might notice that you have a harder time getting over colds and flus and things like that. If a trapped emotion lodges in the reproductive system, you might not be able to reproduce. If a trapped emotional energy lodges in the stomach, you might end up having an ulcer, or you might have indigestion and so on. And so the other interesting thing about these emotions is that each trapped emotion is a specific frequency. And it sounds strange. And for those of us that are so used to Western medicine, and we're so conditioned, by shows like, the TV shows about healing, about doctors and so on. It's all very drug based and so on. And some pharmaceutical companies have spent an awful lot of money and continue to do so every year to keep everybody conditioned to think that healing only comes through drugs and surgery, that those are the only people on earth that actually are at the pinnacle of knowledge about health. But the reality of it is drugs and surgery really are very new professions or ways of looking at things in comparison to how the rest of the world has dealt with health and healing over all of these thousands of years of man's existence.
New things. And also when you say they're kind of last ditch efforts,
Yeah.
it's the worst. It's the acute thing. If I'm going to have surgery, it's just, man, if we've exhausted everything else and it's critical, maybe. And yet now, yeah, as you say, that's just the first thing we go to. Hey, what's a quick pill or a surgery we can use?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and we're conditioned to think that that's the answer. I mean, if suddenly we have a problem, we got to take care of this. Where do we go? Well, we're conditioned to look at Western medicine. But I'll tell you something that's happened since COVID, and that is that people have awakened. They've had a rude awakening. Many people to the understanding that Western medicine does not really necessarily have our best interests at heart. That it's really more about money than anything else. And if you dig deep into that, then that would be like a whole nother show or several shows. But the interesting thing is about the last statistic that I saw was that about 20% of the doctors and nurses have actually left the profession in the US because of COVID and what happened with all of that and that whole nightmare that was, really an exercise, I think, in control, really. But anyway, the beautiful thing is, yeah.
Oh, I want to ask you on the subconscious. I mean, that's something that we, as you know, as a culture is not a focal point, but you saying, man, your subconscious has I think you referred to it as there's an intelligence there. There's an asset there that we have that we're unaware of. And I did think at some point, I just in going through the book, I thought of the lie detector test. Here you are trying to lie. Oh, back to your, the strength, trying to see how my body reacts to a positive statement or a negative statement or to a truthful one or to a false one. That, man, we know that, again, electronically, you can hook yourself up and a lie detector test will let you know.
It works basically the same way. I mean, there's a natural innate response when we say something that is true as opposed to something that is said that is untrue. There's a response by the body, and that's how the whole lie detector, the polygraph, that's what it's based on. And so, I mean, it's still around. We know that it works. So we can ask questions of this internal computer and we can get answers. And the fascinating thing is the releasing of these emotional energies can create dramatic effects in improvements in health and in happiness, creativity, overall fulfillment in life, and helping people to really create the life that they're capable of. And what we have found is that the most important aspect, really, of the emotion code, I think the most dangerous aspect of trapped emotions is when they cluster around the heart and they form a wall around the heart that is meant really to protect the heart. I mean, Kevin, for example, let me ask you, in your own life, this has happened to me, but in your life, have you ever had a situation where you felt like your heart was going to break, like you had that physical sensation because something really, really rough was going on in your life? You're going through a breakup or you're really being hurt in some way. Does that ring a bell?
100%. Yeah. Not until past 2 years, but yes.
Okay. And most people will tell you, yeah, I remember that. Maybe it was when I was a kid, my parents were getting a divorce or whatever. I used to cry myself asleep at night when I was a kid. But the thing is, the heart, it wasn't until 1991 that scientists discovered, they missed it for all these years, that inside the heart are all of these neurites, gray matter, white matter, just like the brain, totally separate from the brain. So there's a heart brain. It's called the little brain in the heart. And then there's a brain in our head, and they're totally separate, but they do communicate with one another. In fact, most of the communications travel from the heart brain to the brain that's in our heads, but they're separate as far as really what their functions are. The brain that is in the heart remembers our things that we really love the most, the things that we care about the most in our lives, the things that bring us the most joy and pleasure. Those are stored in the heart brain. Isn't that weird? Um, and in fact, in the 1960s, when they first started doing heart transplants, I remember this very well. As a kid, I was always super interested in biology and things like that. And it was Dr. Richard DeBakey in South Africa, first heart transplant, huge deal. Life magazine. I'm dating myself, but um, it wasn't too long after heart transplants began to become a routine thing that doctors started noting that sometimes people would come back to them reporting strange things, that they now had memories of being in places they never had ever visited, or their taste in music or food or sports sometimes would completely change 180 degrees. So when they would connect these people with the family, or the close, members of the family of the people who had donated their heart, they would inevitably find out things like, well, yes, our daughter visited Rome every year. It was her favorite city in the world. She went there every chance she got. Now you have memories of being there and you've never ever been there. So those are her memories. How weird is that, right? Or our son was a baseball player and now you love baseball, but you didn't before. And so you inherited that from him. Very strange. There are whole books written about this. Of course, it's called cellular memory.
Well, and you've got the stories in the book that to me, are mesmerizing to read, and it helps me. Now, again, I have my own spiritual component that I put faith in. Yet looking at donors, heart to heart, I look at that and go, I can also just see a flat out mechanical, call it science, whatever, but that's a muscle. Just like if I got a bicep implant, I guess that's possible, but it's a muscle that we put in there that then we're saying, oh, but it actually has some, like you said, some brain, which again, just very counterintuitive to what I've grown up thinking. We have a brain, it runs everything. So it sends signals everywhere. And now we're looking at, well, of course, there's been a lot, and I'm sure you know more than I do on the gut brain, connection and whatnot, but now saying, oh, the heart actually has some capabilities like the brain is. Well, it's totally new, revelatory.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And the ancient peoples believed that the heart was the seat of the soul and the source of love and creativity and romance. And they believed the heart was the core of our being. And the reason, it's obvious, I think, the reason why they came to that conclusion was because of how, if you're really in a bad situation or you're really being hurt on the deepest level, boom, you feel it right here. Imagine someone super close to you, like your mother, telling you she doesn't love you anymore. Where are you going to feel that? Oh my gosh, you're going to feel that here. It's going to be unbearable, right? Because your heart's going to feel like it's absolutely breaking. Well, the ancients knew that. Human beings were no different then than they are now. But they also noticed that in a situation where, imagine you're at a concert and imagine there's a woman that's singing and she's singing really truly from her heart. What happens? Well, your heart begins to resonate, I think, with her heart, kind of like a couple of tuning forks. And if you look around, everybody else's heart's resonating too. And you'll see most people are going to have one hand or both over their heart. They're going to have tears in their eyes. The ancients knew this too. And so they decided, okay, there's something special going on with the heart. And here's all the things we believe about it. Well, in Western medicine and in Western biology, you won't find any of those ideas. The heart's just a muscle and, that's it. Just pumps blood. It's just like a pump. We could replace it with a mechanical pump, no problem. But I really truly believe the heart is everything the ancients believed it to be. And we're finding out now with some great scientific groups like Heart Math Institute that when you're feeling positive emotions, that your heart rate will become more coherent.
Mm-hmm.
And what will happen is then you'll get better ideas, better creativity. Your heart will be able to communicate with your brain better. and you'll be able to literally follow your heart much more easily. And so they have exercises that they have people do that help them to.
I've done some of the heart math, Brad, and
It's great stuff,
appreciate
right?
that. I wanted to speak to the resonance aspect, which again is just was not a part of my upbringing. I wasn't exposed to that kind of talk. And yet it really was somewhat organic as time went on. And I just can't figure, therapy and psychology and a lot of things that I appreciate, spirituality even. And I just can't make sense of some of the things about me, the likes, the dislikes, and trying to, of course, we're supposed to explain and justify everything. And there just was more and more things that I don't know. I have no idea. Why do and now I would say the word connect. Why do I connect with X? Why do I not connect? I just look at it as resonance. It's the main thing. There's a vibration. There's a chord, even to go to a musical aspect. There's a chord that connects, that I connect with. And I don't know. I don't have to know, but I'm going to honor that I connect with that and go towards that. And now just on as well, right now, I'm in a place of being aware of what I don't and letting myself not participate or engage or expose to that.
Yeah. Business is a fascinating thing.
Yeah.
And for your listeners that maybe haven't been exposed to this idea, if you take two tuning forks, now tuning forks will have different frequencies that are usually printed right on the tuning fork. And I have one that's a 512 hertz tuning fork. I've got another one that's 128. Doctors use those, for various purposes. But if you take two of those that are, say you have two 512 tuning forks, if you hit one, ooh, you'll notice the other one is resonating too. And so there's really there's a lot to this. And so one of the fascinating things too is that the emotional energies that we have can deflect our lives and kind of sometimes derail us and push us towards paths that we would rather not follow, because we're carrying, all this anger and grief and sadness and depression and anxiety and so on. And so as people start to get rid of that emotional baggage, and especially as people start getting rid of the emotional baggage around their heart, and that's what this new book, The Heart Code, is really focused on. They can start to unlock the creative energies that are locked up in their hearts, and they can start to really manifest what's inside of them into the world. And one of the really fascinating things about this, Kevin, is that we can inherit emotional baggage at the moment of conception that comes from mom or dad or both. And then that energy can also be stored in the heart wall. And so it's an amazing thing when we start releasing. Yeah.
Can I ask about that?
Yeah.
I actually used this analogy, this story research in my book. I'm sure you've heard of it. It was, I don't even remember now. It was rats or mice where a scientist gave them the smell of cherries, I believe it was, and shocked them.
Yeah.
Smell of cherries, shocked them. And of course they become scared of the smell. And so did their kids. And so did their great grandkids. And so we're down 4 generations, and you've got this 4th generation mouse. You give it the smell of cherries and it recoils, and it has no reason to, never had. Well, that story resonated with me, Brad, because I was looking at the time in some therapy, looking at some ways that I naturally seem to react to certain things that made no sense to me or anyone. I was just, this is the weirdest, it makes no sense. So when I read that story, I thought, I'm not sure, but maybe it's something that happened to my great grandparents. I have no idea. But even that possibility helped me not think that I'm just a loon and that, I still have it to deal with, but that propensity to look and justify why this, why not. And if we can't, I feel like for me, I made it worse.
Yeah. Well, it's absolutely real. I mean, if you, and it happens not only with animals, they have proven it happens with animals, but they still have no idea what the mechanism is. They're looking at the DNA, but it's a quantum phenomenon. And we call these inherited trapped emotions. And so, in fact, believe it or not, we just finished a study It was a preliminary study that was done, duplicating the first portion of that exact study, where mice were subjected to, in this case, a tone at the same time that there was a little bit of electrical current being put through their cage, so they would develop this reaction to the sound. What we found was, I'll give you the bottom line was that energy therapy using the emotion code and body code matched or exceeded the drug outcomes without any adverse effects. I mean, the numbers, the emotion code and the body code demonstrated significant recovery across all measured parameters in these mice. Behavioral improvements from 300 to 1,300%. Antioxidant markers, 700 to 900% improvement. Stress markers, 75 to 90% reduction. So we're very, very excited about this study that we just finished about this exact topic. I mean, and these were mice that were worked on the other side of the planet, by the way, by myself and my research director. And I'll tell you what the interesting thing about this study was, and this probably sounds so crazy, but you see, energy medicine like this is not bound by distance. It works at a distance. And we've certified now over 15,000 practitioners in 108 countries around the world. And they pretty much all work with other people in other areas, in other countries. And anyway, so it's.
I want to ask on that, and even as you. So, if folks remember a little bit ago, you talked about these emotion blocks, these energy blocks, as being like a softball or something. I think you said. Help me understand how the recognition of that, as you go through the methodologies, we talked about it some when we had you on before in the body code book and in the heart code, and looking at these ways to detect and then release something. Again, I'll own it. To my intellect, it's hard to grasp. So let me give you an analogy that does make sense, and then relate and see if you can relate this. Okay. This was I mean, to some degree, we go to therapy and think somebody's going to help us understand our childhood and do the inner work, whatever, and finally work our way out of this perspective and find healing. So that's how we tend to look at it, or even just different information. And this happened a couple of weeks ago. I was watching a movie with some of my older kids. It was one of the Bourne shows with Matt Damon. So he's a character. I don't know which second or third one, but in it shows him, and the last scene is him making the effort to go to this girl's home. This girl, she's let's say she's 20, but as a kid, what she experienced and was told, her parents died, and that one parent shot the other and then shot themselves. That's the story. And he said, I want you to know that's not the story. I killed them. I was hired and I killed it. And he says in the movie, he says, it changes everything, doesn't it? And of course, you see her eyes, and it's an emotional scene. Okay, that makes sense to me, that here you are suffering from a perspective you had. Now, it didn't change the circumstances. Her parents still died. That was true. They're still dead. She's still a 20-year-old orphan or whatever she is. But just the story behind it, I think so. We as humans, we listen and go, totally makes sense. That would make sense to me, to know why somebody did it wasn't as malicious or terrible as it was. Okay, that makes sense. But now you're saying, okay, we could take that. Well, this is my question in paraphrasing, and somewhat just the recognition, we can kind of release that without even different knowledge, without therapy. Help me out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, think of it this way. Let's say that you're really depressed. Okay. And, you've tried all kinds of medications. Those aren't really working. You go to get therapy, and that doesn't really help you either. And then you try the emotion code, and you find out that you've got a wall around your heart made of emotional baggage. And then you find out that when that wall is taken down, suddenly you notice you're no longer depressed, right? This happens all the time, every day, all over the world. If I had a nickel for every time a patient told me, back when I was in practice for 18 years, that, gee, I've been to therapy for that for a long time. I can't believe that's showing up. I thought I dealt with all that. Well, cognitive type therapies are great. They're definitely very helpful. But they don't really get to the energy block, that emotional energy that is trapped in there. And when we release that energy, then suddenly it changes things. It can change your personality for the better. It can result in improved health in the body, more happiness, and it can optimize your success. Those blocks are holding you back, those emotional blocks, wherever they are in the body. And getting rid of those can make a huge difference. And by the way, this also works with animals as well. I don't know if we talked about that last time, but that's a really fun aspect of this and a great proof that this works.
I Okay, to some degree, and I'm not going to go try to get clinical on some of the whys to this, but I wanted to ask in regards to that, if there's any relevance to, okay, I had an experience with dry needling. A chiropractor here in town is a friend of mine who does dry needling. So to me, it was taking that, here I've got my shoulder, I need some help with I got shoulder pain. And of course, he does his thing and tracks it down and says, I think it's your hips are out of balance or whatever. It's coming from somewhere else. It's displaced or whatnot. But then instead of where I might go get physical therapy or even more so deep tissue massage, he goes in with these little bitty needles and, hits it and kind of releases it.
Yeah.
I was asking him on that. Okay, but how exactly? And it just kept, and at some point he said, dude, I don't know. But I used to do the deep tissue stuff. It took all this effort. Now I go in there with the needle and do it, and it releases it. And it just, what have you experienced? It works. I said, yeah, I've never experienced as quick a release of a pain as I did with that. He says, well, there you go with that. But I appreciated that to some degree. Is that relevant here? That, I mean, a lot about it, but at some degree, it's not a perfect science of understanding.
No, you're right. I mean, we don't really totally understand how it works. We believe that a trapped emotion is a ball of energy, emotional energy that's lodged in the body. And when it's released, I mean, what we observe is pain, alleviating, decreasing, or often just completely disappearing when that energy is released. But we see all kinds of other effects as well. Like I said, here's a way that you can think about it. Imagine being born into this world, and if you think about your own energy body as a baby, it was probably pretty clean, right? Pretty pristine and pure. But then as life goes on, bad things happen. You go through difficult relationships and things, and you experience intense emotions. And sometimes those negative emotions are powerful enough that they may become trapped in the body. And so that's like a little dark cloud of energy, like a little storm cloud. And so when you get to be an adult, you're 40, 50 years old. If you could look at that energy being that you were, that was a pristine, clear, clean energy field in the beginning, now it might look like, a storm front, right? Because you got all this energy. As you start getting rid of those trapped emotions, pretty soon it becomes like, a partly cloudy day. And then it just becomes, that energy field becomes, clear and clean and pristine like it was when you started. And during that process, what people often report is that they feel like they're turning back into the person that they were originally intended to be, but that their experiences and their baggage kind of got in the way. And so this is not unusual. Let me share one story with you. One of my favorite stories is from a woman who was a member of the Chicago PD, south side of Chicago, for I think about 5 years, and experienced every traumatic thing you can imagine. And by the time those years were up, she was so deeply depressed that she could no longer work. She put on a good front for the other officers. Nobody knew that she was having trouble and that she was suicidal, but she was. And so for the next few years after leaving the force, she just battled this depression constantly, and she tried everything to fix it. I mean, she owned a gun, and it was every day basically she was having to decide, am I going to live another day, or is this going to be the end? She tried everything, nothing was working, and her mother told her about the emotion code, and she actually got really mad. She was really mad at her mom about it because she had tried everything else and she knew this wasn't going to work, but her mom persisted. And so what she did is she wrote out a suicide note and dated it 90 days into the future and said, this didn't work either. I'm sorry. I'll see you on the other side. And then she started working on herself, and she released a trapped emotion every day, just working on herself, which you can do. And in 45 days, Kevin, she was completely well, completely out of it. She now is about the happiest person that you will ever meet in your life. And she works with the Navy SEALs actually down in Coronado Island. But shifts can happen. This kind of baggage that we have is invisible. You can't see it, but it's interfering with your life. It's promoting disease. It's creating anxiety and depression and phobias and panic attacks and post-traumatic stress disorder and self-sabotage of all kinds. It prohibits you from losing weight as well as you'd like to.
I want to ask on this again. I appreciate the analogies that help myself conceive of it better. So, in the beginning of this book, The Heart Code, I'm looking down because it's on my book. So those who are watching the video, there you go. In the beginning of that, you kind of give a history lesson on, or a walkthrough history on the heart, on the ways that we've conceived, that to me, I felt was very compelling we have always throughout time referred to the heart as if it did have some intelligence beyond just a muscle. How interesting now that you're finding or found out that it actually does. Okay. In that, again, going back to, movies and shows and stories and whatnot that we dramatize. Okay. And we have the person that seemingly is going along, and then something erupts. Mm-hmm. And we think of it, it's often referred to, oh my gosh, yes, suppressed. They suppress their emotions, suppress feelings. We say that again, that's common vernacular, but I haven't ever gone to go suppressed. So where were they? What were they and where were they? If we're saying that in our common vernacular, it would behoove us to go, oh, then they must have been somewhere. But that's totally, so again, to take that as it sounds so new, apparently we've been speaking towards that always. Fair?
Yeah. Yeah, we really have. I mean, the understandings of the heart and also emotions go back, thousands and thousands of years. Back to, I think probably the oldest is maybe the Chinese understandings, combined with acupuncture going back, like 5,000 years. And so, yeah, it's interesting that we live in this age now where we're conditioned to think that Western medicine with drugs and surgery are the only way to take care of the body because they're scientific. Well, there are all these other methodologies that have been used since time out of mind that also wouldn't still be around if they didn't work. So it's kind of interesting.
It is. And then we also think, I tend to think that, we're more evolved now. These are higher level things. And yet not to go, it'd be another show again. Look at the health statistics. It doesn't seem to line up with better health. Here's a question for you. So if we look at my understanding, tell me if I'm wrong, is that you're saying, so I can have these emotional, energetic blockages that exist, and they could be in different parts of my physical being. Fair?
Yes.
Okay. So I could have one here that's affecting my liver, my kidney, my wherever. So are you saying in essence, as I was reading through the book, I wasn't totally clear on this, that you're talking about with the heart specifically, your realization of there are some that are specifically then around the heart that are even more of almost like a meta blockage?
Well, yeah. What's interesting is that before we really were shown, I would say before we discovered the heart wall, but we didn't really discover it. It was it was something that was really shown to us in a way from above. And that story is in the book. But before that, there are many times where I would come away from working on a patient and I would just have this nagging feeling that I was missing something, that there was some emotional baggage that they had that was not available to me. And when the heart wall was shown to us, how emotional energies can build up around the heart and create this wall that is an invisible wall that blocks us from being able to really give and receive love as well, and blocks our creativity and so on. That was really the missing piece of the puzzle. And when I was in practice, one of the things that I used to do with every new patient is I would test them, and I would test the balance, electrical energetic balance of all the organs and all the glands, all the acupuncture meridians, and all the chakras, those deep energy centers in the body from Ayurvedic medicine. And because most of the people that I saw had been told there was no hope for them in Western medicine at all, ever, you might imagine most of these people had most of their organs and glands and chakras and meridians imbalanced. And sometimes with these people, after that initial examination, I would just do one thing. I would just clear their heart wall. I would just work on that wall of emotional energy around their heart and clear those layers of grief and sadness and sorrow and resentment and fear and shame and so on until that wall was gone. And then I would immediately re-examine them. And inevitably, Kevin, what I would find is that the vast majority of all their organs and glands and chakras and meridians were now balanced without doing anything else, just clearing that heart wall. See, there's more going on here than we know. There's more going on, I think, than we can know right now. The bottom line really to me is that we are divine beings and we're waking up to that. And the heart within us, I believe, is the seat of the subconscious. There's more going on than we ever have conceived of. And so when we take down that wall and suddenly that pure essence of who you really are can begin to radiate out unfettered into the world, you start attracting things into your life that you really wanted, right? People fall in love who never thought they ever would. In fact, funny story, about a month ago, one of our practitioners wrote to us and said that she was working on this elderly woman who was really a spinster, never been in a relationship really in her whole life. She was in a nursing home. She cleared her heart wall. And within a week, she has fallen in love with an elderly gentleman that's, in the same nursing home. So there's never a limit, but it's not unusual. You see, when you fall in love, that doesn't happen from the brain in your head. That happens with the brain in your heart. It's a heart to heart thing. And so when that wall is taken down, people fall in love who often never believed it would ever happen for them. And marriage is often improved dramatically when that wall is taken down. And you don't always have to work on both people. Sometimes you just work on one person in a relationship and boom, the change happens for them both. And that, that's really the reason why we've gotten such incredible endorsements. I mean, Tony Robbins, he wrote the foreword for the Emotion Code. He also told us he wanted to write the foreword for this book too, the Heart Code, because this is such powerful stuff. He told me recently he uses the Emotion Code every day. Greg Braden, who was just on Joe Rogan, talks about in his endorsement for the Emotion Code that this is destined to be the cornerstone of healing in the new millennium that's coming. We have a goal to open 1 million hearts with this new book, the Heart Code. And so the exciting thing, for your listeners is they can read it right now today. It isn't released until December 2nd. But if they go to drbradleynelson.com, they can buy some books, do their Christmas shopping, and also they buy 5 or more books, they get a free heart wall session with one of our practitioners. So it's a phenomenal deal.
Is my memory from when we were together last time that you can search, your area for different practitioners that are
Yeah.
licensed through you.
Yeah. So the book pre-order is at it's Dr. Bradley, it's BRADLEYNELSON.com. Our other main website is discoverhealing.com. And on discoverhealing.com, yes, we have a map of the world. So you can, of practitioners, you can look at that map and you'll see, lots and lots of people on there. You can find somebody in your local area. But remember also that because this is energy medicine, it works at a distance. There's no limit to the distance. So you might find that the ideal person for you maybe is in Singapore or maybe in Dubai or something like that. So, but you can look at that chart and see everybody.
Brad, man, I'm just grateful to be with you again. I need to continue to immerse myself and engage with, because I'm still a product of the culture and can forget. I can go along.
Sure.
I'm gotten lost in my own intellect and into the norms of the culture, and I don't take time to, because this at a base degree, to just be in touch with me, to connect with me. And I feel like over my lifetime of striving to connect with everybody and everyone else, the person I didn't take the time to was to sit here and connect with me. So, man, I'm a fan of the work you're doing. Thank you. Thank you for the time you have here. And I'm honored to be a student of and to promote this new book, The Heart Code. So just thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate having me on. My favorite topic. So, I'll do it again sometime.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much for joining us in this discussion. The book, again, from Dr. Bradley Nelson is The Heart Code, the breakthrough method to open your heart and transform your life. The foreword comes from Tony Robbins, and it actually comes out December 2nd, 2025. It's available as of the publishing of this podcast. It's available for pre-order with special gifts if you go to drbradleynelson.com. Till next time, here's to the evolving you.